From the WNIN Tri-State Public Media Center in downtown Evansville, I'm David James, and this is To Main Street, Monday, April 8th, 2024. Millions of Americans will be watching and waiting for the moon to pass between the sun and the earth as the sky darkens in a total solar eclipse. It will look like the morning dawn or the evening dusk for about 5 minutes, and then the celestial passage is over. What a show! There will be watch parties, cheers, and applause. Not the shock and awe of centuries ago. Among the many myths are accounts of creatures taking a bite out of the sun. To some it was a dragon, a wolf, or even a frog. In the language of the Pomo, a Native American tribe, the word eclipse means sun got bit by a bear. My guest is Mitch Luman, longtime stargazer and a luminary in the field of astronomy, who is retiring after a 37-year career at the Evansville Museum of Arts and Sciences. As Director of Science Experiences, Mitch has spearheaded dozens of exhibits and seen thousands of visitors enjoy the Cook Immersive Theater and Planetarium. And I got this quote from a museum executive director, Mary Bauer. She says, Mitch Luman was key in bringing the best in planetarium technology to Evansville. His enthusiasm for education has introduced a generation of tri-state youth to the wonders of the universe. And drop the mic on that one, Mitch. Mitch, welcome to 2 Main Street, and congratulations on your long career.
Thank you, and hello, Tri-State. Good to be here.
Well, good to have you here. You got to be pumped about the solar eclipse coming up.
Yes, I am. And you know, everyone should be, because it's coming to you. You don't have to travel anywhere. If you're within the listening area, if you're north of the Ohio River, you're going to have a wonderful opportunity on April 8th, 2024, next year, to see something that you won't be able to see again in your lifetime unless you travel.
Well, okay. Now, it's going to be directly overhead.
You will be able to see it given clear conditions, and we've had some wonderful weather this April, so hopefully next year we'll produce clear skies. You'll be able to go outside shortly after 2 in the afternoon on April 8th, and looking up, you'll see the sun gradually become eclipsed by the moon, and then for a few minutes, we're going to be under darkness, just as you described.
Yeah, I think there are 5 stages of the total solar eclipse. You said that the partial eclipse begins with this kind of like the bite happening. And then how long does this actually take, the whole process?
Well, about an hour and a half before totality in the tri-state area, there'll be the gradual darkening. And then for 3 minutes, the darkening will persist. Mm-hmm. It's important to note that during the darkening, you don't need those eclipse glasses that people keep talking about to view the eclipse. You only need those when the sun is out. Everyone knows you can't look at the sun. I mean, it's something that you know. In fact, you look away from the sun when the sun's out. But as the sun gradually becomes eclipsed, it becomes easier to look at the sun and not feel any discomfort. And that's where the danger lies. And that's why during the partial phases, which are the run-up to the eclipse, you need to have eclipse glasses. And also it repeats in reverse order at the end. But you know, for 3 wonderful spiritual minutes, the sun is going to be gone, and there's no more of that dangerous light. And you need to bathe yourself in it and just sink it all in, because it feels like nothing you've ever felt before. Having seen several eclipses, I can tell you that there are people that I know that maybe thought that it was nothing to be concerned about, but after they've seen one, they changed their mind.
Mm-hmm. So now, what time of day will this be?
This is going to happen at a very accessible time, 2 in the afternoon, in fact, Evansville time, 3 for the time zones further to the east. You'll be able to see it again for 3 minutes around 2:02 in the afternoon, and it's coming to where you live.
Mm-hmm. Now, where will Mitch Luman be to watch the eclipse?
Well, you know, David, that's a wonderful question. As you mentioned in the lead-up, I will be retiring. I will have been the Director of Science Experiences at the Evansville Museum of Arts, History, and Science for just a little over 38 years, and Mr. Stargazer may need a new base, and I'm still waiting to see where I actually will be on that day. But I'm very involved with the Evansville run-up to the eclipse, and I'll be working on it until the very last day that if I am a resident of Evansville, I'll certainly be here.
Now, of course, a lot of hype about this eclipse. And of course, that brings up a lot more attention to education.
The museum is not the only organization around where you can learn about the eclipse. There's lots of online resources that you can check out. And I know people are curious about this. And if you're listening to this, you'll definitely want to go online and find some reputable sources about the eclipse. There's any number of sites you can learn about this celestial wonder. But starting in August at the Evansville Museum, we're going to have a planetarium show. And I know we'll probably be talking about planetarium shows later and maybe our involvement, you and I, over the years. But this planetarium show will give you the basics. What are eclipses? Why is it happening here? What should you expect? When should you expect it? What do you need to do? And planetarium shows take place at the museum in our immersive theater, which is a wonderful educational learning space. And we're going to complement that with an exhibition, a museum exhibition, where you can learn about all these same things without actually sitting in on a show.
Now, Mitch, do you remember seeing your very first eclipse?
I do. I was a college student at the time, and one of my college buddies suggested that we drive to see one. As I mentioned earlier in this broadcast, you have to either travel to eclipse or be right up directly under one where you are. And this was a case where we had to travel to the one in 1979. We got in his Ford Pinto and drove all the way from Columbus, Ohio to Winnipeg, Manitoba in Canada, crossing the border. And after a very restless night, awoke in the morning to very chilly February temperatures in Canada.
Sure.
And we experienced my first total solar eclipse, which just made me want to see the next one and the next one and the next one. And it's just been a lifetime of wanting to see eclipses. But we know life gets in the way, and it's very difficult to travel around the world to see any number of eclipses.
But there are people that do that.
There are. They probably have better financial means than I do, because these eclipses happen in exotic places like Asia and Africa and South America and over the ocean. So you got to be pretty committed to go check them out. But once again, the total solar eclipse in April is going to happen right here if you're north of the Ohio River and anywhere in southern Illinois or southern Indiana. It's going to happen in your backyard, front yard, in front of your apartment, downtown, in town, out of town. It's happening all over.
Well, there's already eclipse tourism. I've seen a lot of ads about special packages at hotels in the path for people to come in and enjoy the eclipse.
That's right, David. And Evansville and the regional committee that's working on tourism and it includes Henderson, places like Mount Vernon, Indiana, Princeton, Indiana, and of course Henderson and Evansville. We're expecting anywhere between 50 and 150,000 people coming into town. Evansville might double in population for a few hours, because we are the place to go for people in places like Nashville, Owensboro, and other places, even Louisville. I mean, we're the closest spot. They won't see it there, but they will be able to see it here. So our efforts are being directed to those people who wish to be underneath the shadow of the moon and make Evansville their destination.
Where would you recommend a good spot to watch the eclipse in Evansville?
Oh, well, do you have any place in mind?
Well, I think the riverfront would be nice. Probably along the museum, maybe?
Well, where would I think the
Sunset Park?
Yeah, probably the most important thing is, who do you want to experience the eclipse with?
True.
The last eclipse, I was with my family, and it was a very family-oriented event. My kids are grown, and actually my daughter-in-law was there too. So it was great. Once you figured out who you're going to view it with, you just step out into your front yard if you're a homeowner, or if you live in an apartment, step outside your apartment. There'll be many viewing locations in Evansville. Deaconess Sports Park is going to be available if you want to be with the throngs of people coming from outside of town. USI is a wonderful spot, again, if you want to be with the throngs of people, including students. Many, many places are available in Evansville, primarily for out-of-town people who don't have front yards to go view it. The museum, for its part, will be closed that day. We're actually opening the museum up to other museums who wish to bring their members to experience totality. So go wherever it's clear, and don't miss this event.
A Monday afternoon, April the 8th, 2024. Mitch Luman, I guess you've always been a stargazer since a kid?
Yeah, since a kid.
Mm-hmm. When did you get your first telescope?
Well, I remember it well. My interest in astronomy was such that in sixth grade, I was carrying things in the lunch line while waiting to eat, looking at star charts and maps and books for beginners, little golden guides.
Sure.
I expressed my interest to my grandfather, who was a very generous man, and I believe he went to Lane's Drugstore, which was a chain in Central Ohio at that time, and purchased me a Tasco 60-inch telescope, which I, during the late 1960s, trained on things like Jupiter and the moon and tried to look at some other things in the sky. This was around the time that the lunar landings were happening with humankind going to the moon for the first time. And it was a very heady time, and it followed me through school and high school and college and became a career.
You know, it's always fascinating to me to check out the craters on the moon. I mean, that is just fascinating. Almost like you can climb into those craters with a telescope.
With a telescope, you can get really close. But you know, the thing that I think that impresses people most is a planet. Can you imagine what planet that might be?
Mm-hmm.
It would be Saturn, of course. When people first look at Saturn, sometimes they're fully grown adults, and it still pretty much knocks their socks off because they can't believe they're looking at something that they knew looked like that. But
well, you've seen the pictures of it and everything. You actually see it through a telescope.
Yeah, it does something to people, and you can actually see the rings and the planet, and people say that it's like TV or something in your telescope, but it's not.
Now, the Cook Immersive Theater and Planetarium, one of the gyms at the Evansville Museum, and you were one of the people that got it here. So tell me about that process. How did that start?
Slow, hard, but very fun. That pretty much describes the process of doing anything that's really big. I think I'd like to preface that with the notion that it was bigger than me. It involved so many people and so many generous individuals and organizations to make this possible. You know, Evansville's the location, the site of the first planetarium in Indiana before any other city, community in our state had a place where you could see the stars during the day. We had a planetarium dating back to 1952, thanks to the West Side Nuts Club, who purchased the first projector, brought it to the museum's former facility located on 2nd Street in the former YWCA building, and later moving to our Southwest Riverside Drive address. We replaced that original machine that made the Miracle of the Stars back in the 1970s, and that's fairly near when I arrived on the scene. And when I did, I immediately began to look for a replacement to that equipment because there were new technologies that were coming online, and I felt that as Evansville being the first planetarium in Indiana, our community deserved something that was more up to date, and that's where the slow process comes in. It was a slow process of raising the funds for the museum to have its capital campaign, but it was ultimately successful, and we are the proud location of one of Indiana's premier planetariums and astronomy learning centers right here in town. If you've never seen it, it's the Cook Immersive Theater at the Evansville Museum.
Part of the $14.1 million addition to the museum. I think it opened in 2014. Is that right?
It opened in 2014 after a long process of creating all the amenities that you see now today.
And it's a 40-foot concave. How would you describe the theater?
Well, if you've never been to a planetarium before, I think I need to set the stage. You're going to enter into a room under normal room illumination, and then the lights come down, and then the stars come out. And it's a simulation of what you'd see at night. Using digital technology, we're able to create the skies anywhere on Earth at any time and any place. But what you can do with computers that you couldn't do back, let's say, in the 60s, 70s, and 80s is we can relocate to another part of our galaxy, to another part of our solar system. And we're not fixed to just standing and looking at the simulated skies of Earth, but we have the whole database. We have about 250,000 stars in our database, and we can fly through them and go to different places. And things are different in other parts of the galaxy, but primarily we're showing giant screen movies in there and also sharing the night sky with folks.
What was that first show like at the planetarium?
The one in 1952 or the one when we opened?
Yeah, when you opened.
It was pretty nervous for a person who's in charge of the facility because you've tested it, and you've tested it. People come in. It was, crowd after crowd after crowd, and you're just hoping that everything works, which it should, and it did. It was a feeling of accomplishment, and it was a feeling of being much appreciative of all the different people that contributed to its success. And again, if you've never done anything like building a planetarium, it feels like it's so much bigger than you. And as I said before, it just felt like I was a part of this. I'm so glad that I was able to do that part that I did, and thank you, everyone.
Do you ever sit in the planetarium by yourself in the dark and kind of play around with the scenario?
I've been doing that a lot more lately since my retirement is creeping up. A lot of people think that, librarians and museum employees don't actually do a whole lot. But just as an example, with the librarians and the planetarium people, but we stay really busy, and we're a pretty small but industrious staff. So there's not a lot of spare time to actually sit around, but occasionally you do have to sit back and take it all in.
Mm-hmm.
And I do enjoy just turning on the stars, sitting in one of our audience's chairs, and just
chilling out.
And that describes it totally. I suggest that more people do that, and you'll feel the way I feel.
Now let's learn more about Mitch Luman, where he grew up, went to school, and his love of adventure. Let's start with the Evansville Adventure Club, Mitch Luman. Tell me about that.
The Evansville Adventure Club. Social media has given birth to a lot of things, and good and bad. And the Adventure Club is, I think, one of the better things in our community. There's a group called meetup.com out of Boston, and they operate social media sites for organizations, any organization that you can think of for any activity or hobby that you can think of, they have. And several years ago, several of us in Evansville, knowing that there was no organized outdoor group, got together on this social media site and created a mechanism where people could meet up and do different things like kayak and rock climb and bicycle and hike and backpack and camp. And it's been going strong for many years. Almost 300 members in Evansville meet up regularly, usually on weekends and days off, and we do adventurous type things with people that we hardly know, but by the time we're done, we're all friends.
So where have you been?
Lately? Lately, the Adventure Club, several of us had a little jaunt into Newburgh, Indiana, of all places, the wilds of downtown Newburgh, where we actually walked the pedestrian and multi-use trail that runs from along the riverfront along Newburgh.
So you don't have to kayak in Alaska
for
an adventure?
You don't. I mean, we find our adventure sometimes locally, but recently there was an orienteering class, and if you don't know what that is, that's where you get put out into the wild of Indiana, and using a compass and a map, try to find different things, and you carry a whistle in case you really are lost in Indiana and wandering around. And we've been trying to train people to enjoy being outdoors and not being lost.
Now, you are a science educator, obviously working at the museum, and you're teaching at the University of Evansville astronomy classes. I think you've taught some classes at other universities as well. Was it Western Kentucky or?
Yes, I started out teaching high school And we're probably going to get to that in a
That's
moment.
in Cincinnati, right?
In Cincinnati. I was a high school teacher, and I really always wanted to work in a field that was less formal than that. And museum work is called informal education. We are partners with the formal educators, and you'll know that as elementary school, high school, college schools. And been working in informal education most of my career. But about 5 years ago, a friend of mine in the Adventure Club of all places, who taught at Kentucky Wesleyan University, asked me if I would teach one of his sections for him in Owensboro. And I jumped at the chance, and I loved it. I had forgotten how much I loved formal education after being an informal educator for over 30 years. And I parlayed that to my neighborhood university, the University of Evansville, and I've been on the adjunct faculty at UE for the last 4 years, and I've been loving it, teaching Astronomy 101 to anybody who chooses to take that course. And last 3 years, I've actually had a lab that accompanied that course too, where the students would earn their lab credit for graduation. So I've been an educator all my life, and formally, informally, and also as an amateur educator with the Evansville Astronomical Society, getting out and doing things that aren't really related to anything else we've been talking about.
Now, my daughter's a high school teacher, so I'm curious, what was your first day like teaching high school science?
In one word, scary. My university prepared me well for teaching, don't get me wrong. And by preparing me, I mean lots of student teaching experiences. Before it became common to have experiential learning to be a teacher, most universities would throw you in a classroom for 6 to 8 weeks, and that was your experience. But I was in school as an undergraduate, every semester that from my junior year on, so it wasn't unfamiliar to me. So what was my first day like? I mean, it was pretty scary because, you didn't have your mentor teacher there, and it was all you. And so it's pretty scary. But
you survived.
Well, you do survive, and you become more at ease with your students at a given time once you've learned all their names, and they know what their expectations are, and it works out pretty well in the end.
And you went to college at The Ohio State University?
Yeah, they make you say that.
I know it.
Thank you.
I don't want to get in trouble. And you studied astronomy?
Actually, I studied professional education with taking all the science courses that I could possibly take. I love science. I'm a generalist. There are many of us out there. You'll find generalists working in museums and in colleges, and probably also in high schools. And elementary teachers are, in a sense, generalists because they have to be pretty good at a lot of stuff, or at least know a lot of things. And so
they field a lot of questions, don't they?
And teaching is a wonderful field. So if you're interested in becoming an educator, we need you in the education field, not necessarily in informal education, but formal education needs you. We need good teachers, and good teachers are hard to find.
Now, you were teaching high school in Cincinnati. And how did you end up in Hastings, Nebraska, at the museum there?
Yeah, I did end up in Hastings, Nebraska, and it was purposeful because I only taught high school, and I'm going to just tell you a secret, and the listeners a secret. I never really wanted to teach formal education. I always wanted to be an informal educator, but the number of people in that field is so small, and the number of jobs is so tight today even, that it's hard to break in. So what does a informal educator do who's trained to teach school? They teach school. And so, if you're trained to do that, that's what you do. And I feel like I paid back the state that educated me by at least teaching 1 year. I taught 1 year of high school. After applying to 13 other museums over a period of 9 months, I finally found somebody who would take a chance on me. And that place was the Hastings Museum at 1330 North Burlington Avenue, Hastings, Nebraska, 68903, right there on Highway 281. And had some wonderful times there, being their planetarium director.
And as I mentioned earlier, The museum has an exhibit honoring the creator of Kool-Aid, Edward Perkins, the hometown hero, I guess, of Hastings.
Yeah, I found out about that when I was Hastings, but what I found out afterwards is that when I moved to Indiana after 3 years tenure in Hastings, I found out that they actually manufactured Kool-Aid in Evansville, Indiana. So I still remember the smells coming out of the factory there on First Avenue. It was a combination of Kool-Aid and Taster's Choice coffee, which is not a bad smell.
Not bad at all. So how did you end up at the Evansville Museum, Mitch Luman?
How did Mitch Luman end up in Evansville?
Correct.
For those of you who are married, you know how important it is to make your spouse happy. And my spouse was very interested in not being in Nebraska and being closer to this part of the world. And so I told my wife, Lorraine, I said, I will take the first job east of the Mississippi, no questions asked.
Wow.
And I did.
That was bold.
Luckily for me, it was a great job.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't have found a better place to land back in 1985. And when I arrived here, my mentor, John W. Streetman III, took me under his wing and gave me an opportunity to do what I do today.
Mm-hmm. So tell me about your family. Any other scientists in the family tree?
Unfortunately not, but fortunately not. Everybody needs to follow in their father's footsteps. Everybody has their own thing, and even though my children growing up could find things in the night sky with literal ease, they moved into accounting and into managing tech companies. So there you go.
Well, tell me about growing up in northern Ohio. What did your folks do?
Well, my parents were both working parents and encouraged me to pursue my hobby at the time, which was astronomy. I remember fondly receiving my first telescope from my grandfather when I was in elementary school. But probably the most meaningful gift to have been received was a larger telescope gifted to me by my parents as I was a teen. And it was well beyond what I could have afforded, and I still have that telescope. It means a lot to me, and it was the transition between where I was and where I was going, and it allowed me to expand my horizons, so to speak, in the night sky. And I'm very appreciative of my family for surprising me with a very expensive but very meaningful gift.
You know, speaking of telescopes, we have a lot of folks around here with some sophisticated equipment and very avid stargazers, and I'm sure you know a lot of them.
Yeah, I've hooked up with them. I'm also an amateur astronomer. People think of me as a professional because I'm employed by the museum.
Sure.
But in my spare time, when I'm not teaching or advocating for some of the things that I believe in Evansville and civic government, I have a telescope and I know how to use it. It's not the same telescope that I've just been describing, but it is a large 20-inch telescope that's about 8 feet high that fits in a trailer that I haul around the United States. And I just came back from a star party, which is where telescope people get together to observe together in French Camp, Mississippi, where I was able to see lots of things that aren't visible from Evansville.
Clear sky there?
I saw lots of things that weren't visible from Evansville when it was clear.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, I understand you hosted the Great Lakes Planetarium Association in Evansville. And what was the main topic? What did you guys talk about?
Well, planetarium people have their own industry organizations, and I'm a long-time member of an organization known as the Great Lakes Planetarium Association. And we meet annually and also in the spring, and I actually invited the Indiana Planetarium directors, which are scattered all around, to come to Evansville, and we talk among ourselves, we network, we socialize, and we share information about what we're up to in Indiana. In case you don't know, Indiana has some other wonderful planetariums. Ball State University hosts one at the Brown Planetarium. You can see the planetarium at Notre Dame University. and the rest are going to have to go to state parks or schools to see. What the state park at Turkey Run has a nifty little planetarium that you can visit if you're ever at Turkey Run in central Indiana. And many high schools in the Indianapolis area host a planetarium, something that we don't experience here. That's why we're so important to the community. We are the go-to place for astronomical learning here in the tri-state.
Tell us about the Hubble Space Telescope. I think that kind of just opened up really the universe to everybody.
Well, the Hubble Space Telescope is getting a little long in the teeth.
Sure.
It's approaching 40 years old, but it's still cranking out data and science. The Hubble telescope is in orbit around the Earth, and it has the opportunity to see things unhindered by the Earth's atmosphere, which has been great. I'm sure people remember seeing at least at one time a Hubble telescope image. But what's got scientists really excited right now is another telescope called the James Webb Telescope, which is also in space. It's gigantic compared to the Hubble Space Telescope. It doesn't orbit the Earth. It actually orbits the sun in a point around the Earth and the sun system called a Lagrange point. And unfortunately, it's inaccessible by astronauts. You can't go there. So it has to work perfectly. And I'm happy to report that it is working perfectly and has exceeded everybody's expectations in my community and also in the professional astronomical community. Look for great things from the Webb Space Telescope in the future.
Now, where's all that monitored from? All the images? Where do they come into?
Well, the way it works is if you're a scientist, you have to put in your request to get time on the Webb telescope, and then they divvy out the time depending on everybody's request. It's used continuously, 24 hours a day, except when they're doing actual testing and servicing. And it's monitored, I believe, at the Space Telescope Science Institute in Baltimore, which is where the Hubble Space Telescope is also managed. I could be wrong, listeners. You might want to fact check that, but it is managed by our government, and it is operated by the United States of America.
So, have you ever been asked to investigate an unidentified flying object?
Not recently, but one of my favorite activities to do is to go on radio call-in shows and have open call-in for anything that people have seen, and we try to talk it out. I haven't done that in a while, but it's a lot of fun, and it's a different format. But hearing what some people have seen is interesting, and it gives us an opportunity to talk about what it might have been and what it might not have been, and to talk a little bit about space and astronomy. And
well, you sneak that in there, right?
Yeah, it's a hook.
Yes,
to
it
get
is.
people to call.
So, what are some of the stories you've heard?
Well, surprisingly,
Sightings.
Kentucky has some rather interesting abduction stories in western Kentucky, and I don't know the whole story about that, but you can Google it and check out Kentucky abductions. And by the way, just for the record, we are not being visited. People are not being abducted. UFOs, as much as you might like to believe in them, are pretty much an impossibility, and we're not going to have time to get into that right now. We had a speaker at the museum earlier this month, Dr. Jeffrey Bennett, who came and spoke at the museum about extraterrestrial life and what UFOs were. And if you missed that program, that was your chance to learn more about that topic.
So, what are your thoughts on life on other planets?
It depends on how you define life. What would you be interested in?
Well, I mean, I'm interested in anything like bacteria, any kind of mold, anything like that.
Well, if you dig around enough on Earth in places where you think that life doesn't exist, like in the ices of Antarctica or deep underground, miles down, or in hot, bubbling cauldrons of water in Yellowstone, we find life there in places that you wouldn't think you'd find it. And we've only really looked a little bit in space. We've looked at the moon. The moon is dead. There's nothing on the moon. Water is frozen. There's no air. The temperatures are extreme one way or another. And we've been to Mars. Humans have not been personally there, but we've sent our robot and emissaries. Mars is entirely inhabited by robots. I mean, that's what Mars is right now, and we haven't found definitive signs of life there either. And we've scratched and looked around, but as a scientist and as an astronomy educator, I'm confident that given the number of stars in our galaxy and the number of planets that we know are orbiting every star, there's life. What kind of life it is, I don't know. But, the famous words, life will find a way.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it just happens. And I can't believe it hasn't happened somewhere else. Maybe not near.
Well, that's the spirit of exploration, right?
Yeah, people want to know, and it's going to. I think it's going to change the world when we find even a microbe somewhere else. Right now, we're still looking, and I say we, but they're still looking.
Mm-hmm. Now, we've talked about the upcoming total solar eclipse, its path crossing Evansville in April of 2024. And with all the hype, there's also renewed interest in space travel, space tourism, and plans to return to the moon and eventually a mission to Mars. Some science fiction dreams coming true. So, Mitch, you are a fan of science fiction films, is that correct?
The best science fiction film of all time was 2001: A Space Odyssey, but not for me.
You probably parse them so much.
Yeah. Actually, I think the best science fiction film of all time was Harrison Ford's Blade Runner. So for those of you who follow sci-fi and the movies, there was a redo of Blade Runner. So you might want to check that out. But the original is go back and check that one out. Best sci-fi film of all time.
So if I had to give you this question, Star Trek or Star Wars?
Star Trek.
Star Trek? Okay. All right.
I think someone asked me that once before, and I stick to my answer.
Okay. Did you like the Alien series?
Mitch Luman's favorite actor is Sigourney Weaver.
Oh, yes.
Hands down. So anything that Sigourney is in, I'm all on board.
Okay. Now, we were talking about UFOs, the unidentified aerial phenomenon. Is that a phenomena? Is that what they're called now?
That's what they're calling them now.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Now, you've got a lot of exhibits that you've been a part of over the years, and they've been a big part of your professional life. I think more than 50, including several traveling exhibits. What was your very first exhibit at the Evansville Museum? Remember that one?
Well, let's just talk about what museum exhibits are.
Okay.
Museum exhibits are temporary displays of things that you go to museums to see. A lot of museums have permanent displays or semi-permanent, but this is something that our museum excels at the Evansville Museum. We have temporary exhibits that run for 8, 9, 10, 12 weeks, and that way you can come back and see something new. And during my career, I've been the creator of over 50 original exhibits, but there's been twice that number, over 100 exhibits that we've acquired from other people who've developed them and have loaned them to us. The first exhibit that I did when I hit town in 1985, hard to believe, 38 years ago, was an exhibit called By Land, By Sea, By Air. And our director emeritus, John Streetman, had actually created that exhibit, and at least he put the idea in my head. At that time, we had lots of artifacts that were had wheels on them, wings on them, or were floatable. And so we kind of put them all in a room together and called it an exhibition. And it wasn't probably my best work, but that was in 1985. And we followed that with an exhibit on musk oxen. We followed that with an exhibition on Indiana geology in 1985. And then another exhibit on what NASA was up to in that year. So the exhibits just kept going on and on and on, doing anywhere from 4 to 3 exhibits a year for 38 years. It adds up.
What are some of your favorite exhibits that you worked on?
Well, we'll probably talk more about my outdoor lighting exhibit. And I say my outdoor lighting exhibit. I had a staff of 3 that 2 other individuals that worked on that with me. We created an exhibit on a topic that you don't see a lot of attention given to, and that is how outdoor lights affect animals, people, and astronomers. And it was called Our Vanishing Sky. And there are very few people today who see the sky the way that their ancestors did, and we wanted to call attention to that and to how it affected human health and also how it affected animals. And that exhibition went on to tour nationally, and we displayed it on 2 occasions here in Evansville as well as at other venues around the country.
Mm-hmm. Now, the National Science Foundation, a couple of exhibits there. Midwest Wild Weather, what was that about? Well, obviously, wild weather.
Yeah, everyone knows that we have some wild weather here in the tri-state. You don't have to, look very far from, your front door to notice that. We also noticed that elementary school teachers felt ill-prepared to teach us meteorology and science. So we collaborated with other museums to create teaching materials and exhibits that we took to the schools for a period of 4 years to show students what weather was and how important it was and how thunder was created and what the water cycle was. And they were interactive exhibits, and we'd haul them into the schools, mm-hmm. and we'd train the teachers for how to teach in their classrooms, kind of in a package deal. Mm-hmm. And we did this for 4 years. This was supported by your federal government, and it was something they felt was important to do, and we reached thousands of people from all over the Midwest, and we called it Midwest Wild Weather.
Mm-hmm. Now, the Drone Film Festival, that's interesting.
The Drone Film Festival, that was something that we were up to at the museum pre-pandemic. The pandemic kind of nixed it, and it hasn't returned just yet. The museum will be doing laser light shows in June, which is not anything close to a drone film festival. But regarding the Drone Film Festival, we have this wonderful theater that is very immersive. You can see the stars. You can see giant screen movies there. It's all immersive. And we felt a couple of years ago that we should invite filmmakers from around the world to compete with immersive videos that were the same kind of videos you could see on a computer monitor or a television, but we felt that our theater was well equipped to present those.
So this is International Drone Film Festival.
We did, and I was a little disappointed that the U.S. filmmakers were bested by people from around the world, and we could barely get anybody in the U.S. to. The jurors did not like their films as much as they liked the. There's a lot going on beyond our shores, and we're very isolated here in the U.S. And so we had entries from all over the world, including the United States. And we did this for 3 years, and perhaps we'll do it again. We had jurors select the best films in different categories, and we displayed them as a reel of short films on any topic.
Well, tell me about one of the films that really captured your imagination.
I think my favorite film was done by a filmmaker I believe lives in Austria or Germany, and he filmed mountain scenes that just blew me away with a drone. Now, a drone is a remotely controlled aerial vehicle with a video camera on it, and you fly them. And we required that 50% of the videos include drone footage. So some of the movies would be stories that would incorporate drones into storylines, but this was just pure mountain bliss with drones flying up mountains and down canyons, and it was done to musical score, and
wow.
And you just had to wipe tears from your eyes thinking that, oh, I wish I was there seeing what that machine is seeing.
Wonder if he lost any drones in the filming of that.
I don't know, but you'd
crashes.
certainly use you'd lose the video.
Yeah. Well, that had to be a fascinating show. Okay, let's talk about your successor at the Evansville Museum. You're retiring after 38 years. Who's taking over the mantle there at the planetarium? Mitch Luman?
Well, this is he, and you never know when you're in your 60s when you're going to retire. You don't really think about it, especially when you love your job. And in my case, I didn't have a trigger, and I love my job and did not want to quit ever. But I had an experience that changed my mind about that, and it wasn't a bad experience. It was good. I had an intern from Purdue come down from West Lafayette, an intern with me a couple of years ago, and I saw in her what I saw in myself many decades before, that here was somebody who could do what I did and possibly do a better job. And although I wasn't ready to call it quits at the Evansville Museum, I offered her an opportunity to think about taking over. We asked her down for an interview in December, and consequently she accepted. And her first day is the day after I resign, the last day of June. So Evansville will have a new Director of Science Experience. Her name is Carlisle Wishard, and she'll come to us almost with a PhD. She's defending her dissertation this summer, and will graduate from Purdue University with a PhD subsequent to that.
We'll have to have her on the show. So what's next for Mitch Luman?
What's next for Mitch Luman? I love astronomy, of course. If you've been listening to this broadcast, you probably caught that by now. Just because you don't have a 9-to-5 job and you do a certain set of things doesn't change who you are. And I'm not going to change. I will continue to do outreach wherever I am, and I'm not completely sure that you're going to find me in Evansville a year from now. And you may find me teaching at a small college somewhere part-time, taking my personal telescope to outreach events intended for the public. And I might actually hook my wagon up to NASA and be one of their solar system ambassadors.
But we know where you're going to be, Mitch, on April the 8th, 2024. You'll be somewhere in the path of the total solar eclipse. That's pretty basic, isn't it?
David, you can count that I will be in the path of the solar eclipse. And if you're not, it's going to be on you, because the next total solar eclipse that you can drive to in North America is going to be 2045.
Wow.
So get it now, or get an airplane ticket and fly to the next one that's off continent somewhere.
Well, my guest has been Mitch Luman, retiring after 38 years at the Evansville Museum of Arts and Sciences. A lot of exhibits. The planetarium, of course, is fabulous. Again, congratulations, Mitch. Enjoy your next lunar and solar stages of your life. I'm David James, and this is 2 Main Street.